guys, I'm on the road today, getting some stuff done, visiting some friends of the podcast, which you will find out about a little later in the next couple of weeks, what we're doing there. But yeah, it's been a crazy week trying to kind of finalize move of the operation. We're officially out of Philly with the fulfillment 3PL. So definitely been a little wild, but we're getting there, stabilizing, and we're seeing really good volume and getting everything together. So it's been a crazy experience moving operations, but we're getting it done. So this week we had podcasts from Dexery, which are doing really interesting stuff around data collection and autonomous robots and combining that. So definitely check that out. And we also had an interesting podcast featuring Vandalan and Right Hand Robotics talking from both the integrator side on Vandalan's side and then the solution side on the Right Hand Robotics side and kind of how that relationship works, and it is really interesting. So definitely check out the audio podcast. Also, if you missed it, I was featured in the Transfix podcast as well. You can check that out. Also on the Robot Report too with Mike Oitzman, who's a longtime friend of the podcast. We kind of started podcasting together back in 2018, 2019, and we were bouncing a lot of ideas off each other in the beginning there. So it's great to kind of come back and be on his podcast there. So definitely check that out. We talk about automation, robotics in the warehouse, and also a little bit too of kind of my journey through the podcast and all those different types of things. So definitely check out those audio podcasts and the other podcasts too. Also, shout out to Nate Schutz too. Recently connected with him, and he's doing a awesome podcast, I think, called Bootstrappers Guide to Logistics, all about founders and how they bootstrap their logistics companies and all those types of things. It's almost like how I built this kind of for the logistics space, which is really cool. That's one of my favorite podcasts, how I built this actually. So other than that, lots of stuff going on behind the scenes, trying to get things ready. So we will have, and this is a little tease, we'll probably have some more better details, concrete details for you next week. But if you're a 3PL shipper, 3PL or a shipper, we definitely want you to come out to this happy hour that we're going to have in September. It's looking like September 21st, and we'll be doing that with a partner, and it'll be in Philadelphia. So we are going to have more details on that by next week, I would imagine. We're just kind of fleshing out the venue and all those different details. So when that happens, we will let you know, but definitely interested in getting you all out here and checking that out. Additionally, I'm going to be at ASCM Connect in September, so if you're going to be there, let me know. We can connect at Connect, right? And then we'll be at CSCMP Edge in October with our friends from Motion 2 AI, and we'll be in the booth with them. So definitely come by if you're going to be there. We're going to do live stream from their booth. So definitely looking forward to getting some people on there and, featuring them on the new warehouse platform. So for this week, we're going to have a safety tip from Michael Simpson of NFI, and he's from their e-commerce division. We recently recorded a podcast together, which will be coming out in a few weeks, but he gave us a little warehouse safety tip too as well. So let's check that out and get our safety tip of the week from Mike Simpson.
Hi, my name is Mike Simpson, and I'm the Vice President of E-commerce at NFI. My warehouse safety tip of the day is to really focus in on the behavior-based safety programs that are industry standard for warehousing. Behavior-based safety is focused specifically on the behaviors for safety, not trying to catch someone doing something wrong, but catch someone doing something right. And that helps build a more a robust and collaborative safety environment because it gets both the hourly employees and the leadership involved and all on the same page. That is my warehouse safety tip of the day.
All right, great safety tip there from Mike Simpson. Thanks to Mike and the NFI team for getting in touch with the podcast and getting involved recently. Definitely interested in getting that podcast episode out there so you guys can learn more about what they're doing on the e-commerce side as they continue to expand that part of their business. And for our main segment today, we are going to hear from Ryan Howard of FreightSmith. He is the VP of Growth over there. And he's going to tell us all about FreightSmith and how they're closing the gap where inbounds lie when it comes in from when it's coming into your yard, checking in all the way to the dock and managing that situation where oftentimes you find that there's a gap in communication, and as we'll find out in the conversation, lots of waste too as well that they're eliminating, which is a really good thing. So we're going to talk to Ryan, learn more about FreightSmith, and we're also going to see a little bit of how the platform works from the shipper side, but also from the driver side too. It's an all involved kind of ecosphere there. So we'll definitely check it out and make sure if you missed something with the new warehouse, you check out the newsletter later today. So here's Ryan Howard of FreightSmith, and let's enjoy learning about this inbound management system. This week, I'm going to be joined by Ryan Howard. He is the VP of Growth at FreightSmith. And we're going to talk about FreightSmith and how they're kind of changing the game a little bit around inbounds with their inbound management system and why that's important and why there's a gap in that area too. And Ryan's going to also show us a little bit how the platform works, both from the driver side and also from the shipper side or the receiver side, I guess, in this case. So Ryan, welcome to the show this week. How are you?
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Good to be here. I know you and I have connected at a few events over the last couple of years. It's super good to be on the podcast. I've been following this a while and think you do a phenomenal job. So appreciate you inviting us on.
Definitely. I appreciate that. And it's great to get you on too and be able to connect in multiple ways, but also get you on here to share what you guys are doing at FreightSmith as well. So why don't you kind of give us kind of the little lowdown and the scoop, the brief overview on what it is that FreightSmith does.
Sure. So as you mentioned, FreightSmith is really trying to solve what we like to call a black hole in the warehousing space. It's really primarily from gate to gate. You've got a TMS, you got a WMS. These loads are coming in, but they just kind of disappear until they're kind of unloaded, received into the WMS, and then these people are turned loose. And around that process, there's a lot of things that happen that could be time consuming, and we're trying to speed that up. We're also trying to mitigate detention charges. So when trucks are there for too long, we're trying to also help with throughput, help them turn doors faster, and which also turns into oftentimes overtime in the facility. So if we're slowing down the docks, if the trucks are lined up down the street, and it flows into overtime, or maybe you've got to run 7 days a week and you could run 6 if you could turn days faster. So we're doors faster, sorry. So we're really trying to help these facilities turn the doors faster and in the end really become a shipper or receiver of choice. So these truck drivers want to come to your facility, want to get their trucks unloaded there because you're going to operate efficient.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting. You guys call it the black hole there. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's great. But it certainly is like a kind of a gap in time almost of what's going on in that area. And I'm curious. So you guys are IMS, right? An inbound management system is what you're calling it.
sure.
So
Yeah,
so tell us a little bit on the side, like, because obviously, we're in supply chain, we're in warehousing, and there's like, a billion different acronyms for for
sure.
systems, right? So tell us, I guess, maybe from your perspective, FreightSmith's perspective, like, why is there that gap where we have WMS, YMS, TMS that's kind of in that area, but like why is there a gap of no coverage from a system, or why has there historically been a gap of no coverage from a system perspective on that inbound side?
Sure. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that some of these systems don't talk to each other properly. And then oftentimes There's third parties maybe working on the dock. There's a third party working the security station to get them in the gate. There's a WMS that may have some form of dock door management piece, but it doesn't really talk to the inbound scheduling software that's coming in. And so, you've got these pieces of the pie that kind of exist, but they're not cohesively together trying to really solve the problem holistically, where you can kind of get the gate and step with the scheduling and step with the dock doors and step with the receiving office, the receiving clerks, and the people who are working the unloading, and all of those pieces together flowing more eloquently. I mean, that's the goal here, and I think that's what the problem is really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have a great point there about all those systems kind of not communicating, and then creating this gap in between, which I think is such a critical gap, as well. As you mentioned, could result in having to operate an extra day, or roll into overtime, and just being able to streamline that little bit of the process there, and kind of the beginning of the process, essentially, for a warehouse, right, is that
Sure,
inbound side, right? The product coming in is kind of the beginning of the whole flow.
sure,
So
absolutely.
being able to make that more efficient and all those things is a great thing. So why don't you kind of show us and walk us through a little bit of the flow of where
Sure.
freight kind of hits within the processes.
All right, well, I'll pull up a little presentation here. I'll make pause from time to time, and feel free to ask questions when you want to. But
Sure.
let's kind of get this thing started here. And really, as I mentioned, we're filling this gap. And if you can see this slide here, you'll see kind of where we fit the IMS piece. As we know TMSs, we know WMSs. I think we've kind of invented another acronym, which is the inbound management system, and managing this piece here, which is oftentimes forgotten. So, and I think, in layman's terms, these most people think about, something coming to a warehouse or a shipment coming to a warehouse. So somebody picked it up somewhere, they brought it to a warehouse, and they dropped it off. And that is true, but there are a lot of pieces that happen around that can really slow the process down, or in our case, hopefully speed the process up. And that is the goal here. And you mentioned even, that is the front end of everything. And inventory is the lifeblood of any company, organization, grocery retailer. And if you don't have your stuff stocked inside the warehouse, you can't ship it back out. So the quicker we can get it off the truck and get it put away, the more availability it is for inventory. And oftentimes these buyers and stuff are often wondering, where's my stuff? When's it coming in? Has it been unloaded yet? And this gives better visibility to that as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely agree. I mean, I think there are so many more touch points, and just in general in our space, right? I mean, there's a like you said, there's a perception of box comes in the door, box goes out the door. I have my product at my porch, right? And it's not
Yes,
that easy, right? It's not that simple as it sounds. So, and as we see here in the process flow, I mean, obviously there's a ton of touch points. But you said something there I think that's really important, is that that inventory is kind of the core and the backbone and foundational of your operation. So getting it right from the beginning, and getting it right through all these steps here that we're about to see, I think is makes a ton of sense. So talk to us and kind of show us kind of the flow here that
sure.
you're showing, and where FreightSmith comes into play.
Absolutely. So, obviously a purchase order is created through an organization, and, somebody's going to go pick that load up. And it's shopped through brokers, carriers, different shippers, and things like that. But hopefully, they're going to go into some sort of system and actually schedule this load to be delivered at a facility. Now, that's done in varying ways at different organizations. Sometimes it's just Excel spreadsheet, emails, and phone calls. And then sometimes there is a scheduling system. We've got our system called Schedule Pro, which the
Okay.
carriers, brokers, organizations can go online and they can manage all of their loads coming to a facility via this web portal. So it makes it real nice and easy. They can adjust loads. It's very warehouse basically friendly. So if you have different dock doors that do different things, maybe this group of dock doors are dry, this is perishable, this is frozen, it can be designed around where this PO needs to go. But we intersect with whatever scheduling software they have to bring it into our FreightSmith IMS, so we know what's coming to that facility. So in essence, a driver picks up this load and, it starts moving on down the road. They Actually, I'll show you this real quick. We added this slide. Sorry about that. So this is a little bit of how a carrier would go on and actually register with FreightSmith. Once they've registered for then on, they can go in and create, scheduling appointments for the facility. So next
Okay.
thing, this driver has scheduled their appointment, and they're going to go pick up this load. And then it's going to be in transit. And here comes the driver. He's driving. And
There he is.
during this process, we're strongly encouraging them via the warehouse and the, texting, whatever we can do to this driver, say, hey, we're utilizing this FreightSmith app at this facility. We'd love for you to use it. And what we found is there's been about 100,000 drivers download this FreightSmith app. And
Wow.
once they use it at a facility that has FreightSmith, they're like, all right, this was a whole lot easier. I love it. And we hope, going forward, they'll actually be the troops out there telling other facilities, hey, we use this FreightSmith app over here. It sure was a lot easier. I got in and out the yard faster.
Interesting. So I'm curious on that side. I mean, do you see like the drivers kind of pushing shippers to get on FreightSmith, or the shippers are pushing the drivers, or is it just going kind of both ways?
It's going kind of both ways, but obviously initially we're relying on the warehouse, the shipper themselves
Yeah.
to say, hey, you're coming to our facility. We'd like you to use this FreightSmith app. It'll might make life easier on all of us. And one thing we do though, we redundantly do everything that happens in the app. We can also do via text. We have the driver's phone number. Let's say the driver hasn't downloaded the app, or maybe they just don't have notifications turned on. So they need to still be able to get these messages. So we make sure we kind of send it out both ways, so the
Mm,
driver is at least seeing this information. But
got
this
it.
is where the process starts speeding up. So when the driver gets around 120 miles out, 24 hours out from their scheduled appointment, because we've got the schedule, we know they're coming in, they can do this
Mm,
process called pre-check. And what they're doing is they're opening up their app and they're going in and they're basically saying, hey, this is me, carrier X. This is my PO. I'm coming to this facility, scheduled on this day, and what they're doing is giving us the information to sync up with the schedule. Say, yep, you're that driver, you're that load, you're supposed to be coming in. And once they've done that, they've sped up the process a whole lot. Because as you might know, working at a warehouse, when these drivers show up at a gate or whatever, they show up with a bill of lading and a stack of papers that say, hey, I'm here to get this truck unloaded. And somebody looks through the paperwork and verifies they're on the schedule. That's if they're on time or not on time or really late, whatever, but they're trying to get this figured out because they just showed up. And then they say, all right, yep, you're good. Come on through the gate. But now I need you to go to the receiving office and walk in with that paperwork. I need you to go stand in line with the other 10 guys in there and wait until you get to the window and they process your paperwork and then tell you a door to go stick your truck in. So what we're
right.
trying to do is speed that process up so that when they get to the facility, they've already kind of gone through most of that process. As they get closer to the facility, they are then notified again that, hey, look, you're now within range of basically being unloaded. You're either on site, you're sitting at the local Loves down the street,
Yeah.
and you're about 2.5 hours from your appointment or less, and you're going to do a actual check-in and say, hey, I'm here within range, I'm ready to be unloaded. So once that happens, it kind of goes over to the receiving office. The receiving office says, hey,
Mm,
this guy's available to be checked in remotely. Let's go ahead and go through the process of checking this guy in so that he can get his truck unloaded. And so what we're going to do is basically give them a digital gate pass. Once they have this gate pass, that allows them to get onto the facility. They show that to the guard or whoever, and it's basically saying, hey, we know you're supposed to be here. We've checked you off. You're good to
mm.
go. Come on into the facility, go to the staging area or whatever the next process is for them.
Really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it totally streamlines that part of the process. And like you said, I mean, I kind of chuckling in there, like just thinking about the redundancy of things and traditional processes, right? I mean, you mentioned they get to the security gate, show them all the paperwork, and then they're like, oh, we'll take all that same paperwork and show it to somebody else too, right?
Yeah,
It's,
yeah. And
why?
oftentimes that's a third party service out there. So they're just, checking
Yeah.
something off. They've got maybe something pulled up on their screen that says, yeah, here's the schedule for the day. Yep, yep, you're supposed to be here. So if they knew all that in advance, and really part of what we're trying to do is keep those trucks from building up at the gate, Because if they can wait like off site somewhere, at a love station, at a truck stop, somewhere down the street, they don't have to sit there until we basically summon them in. And we've got some facilities we work with who are like close to interstates, and they actually have the local municipality saying, hey, look, y'all can't keep lining up trailers all the way down the road. You're causing problems. Well, this has now allowed them to kind of say, look, as long as you're within range, we can summon you in via the app, and then it's time to come on. And you'll see in this next piece, basically what we're doing is we're going to go through the process of assigning a door. So on the IMS piece, the receiving office basically sees, hey, if this driver's acknowledged that they're available to be unloaded, let's go find a door to put them in. And they'll look and see what all doors are operable, which ones are in use, which ones are inoperable, are they blocked, and then we're going to assign them a door through the system. So what's great is that now, once again, they still haven't got out of their truck yet. They haven't walked into the receiving office. They're getting this notification now. Proceed to the guard station, or they could have already been through and sitting in the yard. Please, back up into 21, unhook, and they could start doing the unloading process. Once
Yeah.
that's going, then the guy can go into the receiving office and drop off his paperwork or do whatever he needs to do with the receiving office. But we're not slowing that down, and we've kind of proven that this process saves probably 30 minutes, sometimes upwards of an hour, for these drivers, which in the end, for drivers, turnaround time is everything, because I can go pick up another load and I can make additional money. So
Yeah.
it makes you be like I said, a receiver or a shipper of choice, where these drivers actually want to come because you're going to get in and get out within a reasonable time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes so much sense too, where you mentioned, that gap of time where, the driver's coming in and then has to go inside maybe for a door assignment, and then backs up and then also has to go in to give the paperwork, and then unloading doesn't start until after that. Whereas like you're closing that gap of like, okay, like as soon as that trailer hits that door, we can start unloading because the driver already knows this stuff, and then the driver can take care of paperwork situation while it's being unloaded, and save a lot of time, not only for the shipper side on the unloading side, but also for the driver too, as you mentioned. And that just creates those better relationships between shippers and drivers, which I think is really important, because you want them to be like partners, especially if they're
Yeah,
coming to you multiple times, and you want them to work with you and not be difficult in certain ways. So really good that you guys are focused on that. I'm curious, kind of maybe if we take a little step back in the
sure.
process, like what happens now if the driver has the appointment time, but something happened in the warehouse, in the operation, and they're running behind a little bit. Can you give that driver like a notice or a heads up, so maybe they don't come to the facility like as early, or tell them you're running like an hour late, so come a little later?
Yeah, you could push a notification to them through the system, absolutely, because we're collecting that phone number on the front end when they're doing the pre-check, and it's attached to that PO information. Then yeah, we can notify them that. Now, if they're utilizing our Schedule Pro system, whether that be the carrier themselves, the broker, or us who's needing to make that change, you go into the system, adjust the appointment, and then fire that back out to who all needs to get it.
Oh wow, I think that's great
Yeah.
too. I think because you get, I've certainly been in a situation where we're running a little behind, and the driver shows up, and they're like, "Well, my appointment was this time," and it's like, "Oh, we're not ready," and it creates kind of that tension a little bit that I was mentioning there before, and I think that helps to alleviate that, so the driver can hang out at the loves like you mentioned, or something a little longer, or maybe get some lunch or something like that. So I think that that's really great in kind of making that relationship better too.
Absolutely. And then in the end, when that does happen, oftentimes now they're getting slapped for a $500 detention fee or something like that. I mean,
Right.
we've got a client that we know of that we're working with now who, you know, their monthly detention is probably 50 grand, across the whole month. If we could save
Yeah.
them 20% of that, what's that
That's
worth
a
to
lot.
them? It's a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's when you have some of these very high volume facilities where there are, hundreds, if not 100 trucks a day going through there. I mean, think about those micro moments that add up that
Oh yeah.
can really make a difference. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, seconds turn into minutes, minutes turn into hours,
absolutely.
right? And hours turn into days. So
In today's,
it's
yep.
crazy, especially at the scale, like you mentioned, some of these operations that we have now run at, and just the sheer volume. I mean, it adds up so quickly. So there's huge cost savings there, I think.
Yeah, we did a recent study on a facility. I forgot if it was a month or it was a segment of time, but it basically saved them 4.5 days in the facility,
Oh wow,
basically just in
yeah,
time from kind of the way it was done before to the way it was done with FreightSmith. Yeah.
wow, that's incredible. So okay, cool.
So,
So what
once
happens
this, yeah, so once
upload?
this drivers, once they're done unloading, the drivers, basically receive a notification that their unload's been complete. So once again, they haven't gotten out of their truck. And then they go through this process of checking out. Now, some facilities either have an unloading service on the dock, or maybe the facility themselves are collecting money on the dock. It could be cash, it could be com checks, it could be relay payments. And this is a laborious process because the driver's coming back in there, they're giving them a
Yeah,
price, and they're going through this process of verifying a T check or EFS and com data, and this is time consuming. So we've digitized all of that so they can literally sit right there in their truck, choose how they want to pay, go through that process, and check out. And I mean, saves tons of time. And then on the back end, once this is all closed out, they're going to get a receipt digitally to their phone that says, all right, here's what we did. If there was a price, here was the price. And then here's the appointment time, the check-in time, the door assigned, when it started, when it ended, when we turned you loose. And so oftentimes we have clients utilizing this data to mitigate or fight detention because a driver
yeah,
might be like, oh, I was there for 3 hours, da 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 da. Well, we were done then. You may have taken a smoke break or something like that. I
yeah,
haven't got on the yard, but we know when we were done.
yeah,
The facility does. So we release them. And one of the things we do on the back end, and we think this is important, there's a survey in the app. So as soon as the driver
mm,
closes out and we turn them loose, basically a survey comes up and basically allows them to give a facility rating, you know, what you like about using the app, what it has the facility, you have clean restrooms, whatever that facility wants to ask. And that can be
oh nice,
modified based upon the warehouse. But this is super important because, you'd rather them tell you there than get on a Google review. And I don't know if you've ever been on any truck driver,
yeah,
chat rooms
yeah,
or
I've seen
whatever,
some.
but they will light up these warehouses that they don't want to go
Oh
to, you know. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great thing, like for that perspective too, of like putting yourself as like best in class shipper, and a place that truckers want to go, and I've certainly seen some of those Google reviews, and they they can be pretty brutal. So it's great to be able to have that too as well, and I think also like on the shipper side, like that's a great thing to translate back to the employees too, to allow them to know like, hey, you guys are doing a great job on the service side too,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
working with the drivers as well, and also an idea of like how to tell the employees like, oh, we could improve upon this, or we need to
Hmm.
look at something like this. I think it's really kind of a great all around system to be able to develop that relationship, and make things better for continuous improvement.
Yeah. I mean, there's just simple things like, is there a restroom available to use with ease of use for the drivers? Is there an air conditioned place to sit down for a little bit? Do you have a soda machine and, you know, some, chips and things like that? So those things go a long way for these drivers. And, like I said, makes them want to come back again. And then let's just kind of finish off here on the back end. Well, even during the process, I don't want to call this the back end because this little slide really isn't the back end, but there's all kinds of metrics and information that we're collecting during this process that's available to the receiving clerks, to the receiving manager there to understand what's going on their docks. And, you've got unscheduled POs that are pending approval that someone just said, hey, I'm bringing it, but I didn't, have anything on the schedule. You've got trucks that are sitting in staging. You've got trucks that are waiting on
Right.
paperwork, and understanding what's happening with these dock doors and what the different loads and trucks that are sitting in your facility, amongst your facility in the staging area, helps to really fight that mitigate that detention piece, because you're like, oh man, we got this truck that's, they got in here 20, 30 minutes ago, and not only were they weren't early, they were on time for their appointment, and now we've already eaten up 30 minutes of our 2 hour window or however long we have in order to get them in and get them out. So that kind of stuff's invaluable when it turns into, hey, I'm about to get charged detention because I kept this guy here too long, or I'm about to get lit up on some, like I said, chat room or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a big underlying point with what you guys are doing is like you're removing kind of that time suck of all that paperwork, administrative stuff in between. That's really starts to eat into that time, as you said, and you can focus more on like the actual action that needs to happen, which is that's going back to like kind of the beginning of our discussion that core inventory needs to get in the building, right? So
Yep.
so you're really able to focus on that task and operationally have that benefit not only your end customer because you're able to get that inventory in the building sooner, but overall be able to operate more efficiently in a smarter way. That not only is great for the shipper receiver, but also for the drivers themselves as well, which I really love that you guys have thought about that all encompassing kind of relationship and that handshake there in a
Yeah.
sense, right, between the driver and the receiver. And it's totally a great streamlined process and definitely really interesting to learn about it. And I'm happy you could show us FreightSmith and what it is that you guys do. If people are interested in learning more about FreightSmith and potentially getting FreightSmith within their facility and their operations, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to freightsmith.net, which is our website. Ryan Howard, look me up on LinkedIn if we're not connected. A lot of you are probably I'm connected to, and would
Yeah.
love to share with you more, do a demo. We also are open to do a free site survey, so we'll come out, we'll fly to your facility, we'll take a look at your processes and what you're doing, and really help you understand where the gaps are, because sometimes things are done just because it's the way it's always been done. There's just legacy systems in place, or just tribal knowledge around the way something's been done, and you don't even look at it. It's like, oh, receiving does that, the unloading service handles that, and you're not really focused on it. But what we see when these facilities put this in, let's say they've got 30 facilities across the country. Well, they put it in two or three, 2 or 3 weeks later, like, okay, put it everywhere because they recognize, okay, yeah, you're right. There are not only minutes, there's hours, there's days here that we can save. And in the end, that's someone's pocketbook. And I'll always like to say this, really who ends up paying for all of this is the consumer. I mean, it ends up on the store shelf. Someone ends up paying for it, and it's usually passed on to the consumer. So anything we can take out of the process that adds cost to an end good is valuable to us, the consumer. And then in the end, you become, a place where people want to shop and buy their stuff because your prices are better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point, and I certainly can see the savings adding up very quickly. And I'm certainly, as you're saying, in the examples too as well. So very, very great to learn about FreightSmith with you, Ryan, and really glad you could join me on the show today. And we'll definitely put all the information about FreightSmith in the description of the video here. And if you're watching live, we'll throw it on the comments as well. So definitely thank you to Ryan and the
Thank you,
FreightSmith team
Kevin.
for participating in this week's All Hands.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the time. Have a good day.